Alright, so what's poppin', everybody? It's your man, Young Ida Costello, back again with another video. Now this video is going to be another album review, and today's album review is going to be Kendrick Lamar. Damn. Now I am going to keep it real. I am a little late on this video. I already had the first thoughts out. I had the first thoughts video a day after the album dropped. But when it comes to an album like this, and when it comes to a Kendrick Lamar album, I had to make sure I did my research. So I waited. I continued to drop the content, but I listened and did research and went on Rap Genius and looked up lyrics and listened to it in reverse and reversed the different languages and reversed different things, and then came back. Bitch! Johnny won't want to go to school no more. Bitch! Hoes! Damn! Bitch! There's somebody getting killed! Tell me what you bitch! Bitch! All the memories collected. This shit is dope! I've been hungry all my life. Me. Goddamn us. Goddamn we. God. Kinda just sat with the album for as long as I could, just to absorb as much as I could. And I will say that what I got to tell you guys today, hey bro, I'm just gonna keep it real. I got some information. So when it comes to Kendrick Lamar, I will say that this is his third or fourth studio album. It depends on whether or not you put Section 80 in there as his first album. And I will say that when I heard that this album was coming out, I was like, okay, I'm kind of interested to see how this album will come out. Then we saw the album artwork, and I'm not gonna lie, I love Kendrick Lamar. I've been listening to Kendrick Lamar since like 9th grade, and I will admit, after seeing the track list, I was sitting there like, I don't know. And I will say that when it comes to Kendrick Lamar, after multiple listens, Kendrick Lamar came through once again. Now when it comes to Kendrick Lamar albums, this is not your standard Kendrick Lamar album. This album sounds nothing like Section 80. This album sounds nothing like Good Kid, Mad City. This album sounds nothing like Overly Dedicated, To Pimp a Butterfly, or Untitled Unmastered. This album is completely different, and I think it's crazy how every single time Kendrick Lamar makes an album, he is able to make it refreshing and different at the same time, still while sprinkling a little bit of new elements in there. I thought that that was extremely dope, and I thought that that was a nice little twist to the album. And I will say that the first time I heard this album, I was kind of like, yo, where is he doing? How is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Different sounds were going through my head, different voices were going through my head, and I will say that those different voices that I heard the first time, that made me think, I don't know how I feel about that. Those actually came out to be the favorite parts of the album. Now when we're talking about production here, and we're talking about texturally, like texture wise, the texture of this album is extremely deep. Like when you listen to an album, you might hear voices in the background, you might hear random eerie singing in the background, or like double layered voices that are double layered up, and you might not notice that the first time, you might not notice that while you're listening to it in the car, but then once you put on some headphones on and like everything is quiet around you late at night, you might hear different things that you didn't hear before. Or like maybe let's just say you're hearing like a chorus, you might hear words or like scripture passages being read in the background while the chorus is going on. I think that that's extremely dope, and when it comes to the level of detail that was put in this album, that's something that definitely needs to be put into context, and that's something that definitely needs to be mentioned. Now also, as far as production, some of the album was produced by Mike Will Made It, but I will say that the first half of the album, the production of the first half of the album reminds me of the RZA from Wu-Tang Clan, and also the RZA's production on Ghostface Killah's 12 Reasons to Die album. I think that that is pretty dope, because that Ghostface Killah 12 Reasons to Die album is definitely a great project. The production behind that is definitely extremely detailed, and it feels old. Like the production of it, the sounds of it all, it feels very warm on the ear. It doesn't sound new. But I will say that as the album goes along, it takes a little bit of a modern style while still going back. This album is real bipolar. This album goes here, then this album goes there. This album can start out in one way, and then the production can just switch and it turns into like this whole different beat break. This album has different textures going over here, different sounds going over here. This is just a completely different album, and the more you listen to it, especially the first time you hear this album, it doesn't sound cohesive at all. This album is definitely not a seamless listen. This album is almost like Kendrick Lamar is going through something and like documenting it in a journal as he goes along. I mean, when you think about it, that can kind of take you back and make you think of the overly dedicated days, but I mean, like, that's still something that's real different and something that you don't really see too often in music. Now, as far as highlights for this album, I definitely have to give one to the second half of DNA. Yo, the second half of DNA, where like that Fox News clip where they just said a whole bunch of just stupid shit about Kendrick Lamar, where like they had like this Fox News clip going on, and then like it cut to the second half beat break, and he was like, I live a better life, fuck your life, I live a better, and he just went off. Yo, when the second beat break happened and the beat drop came, I was like, boy, you done did something here, man. In my opinion, the second half of DNA kind of reminds me of the Heart Part 4, kind of like the third part of the Heart Part 4. It was kind of like Kendrick Lamar was like, yo, I've been doing this. We all know I can rap. Y'all kind of downplaying me. Y'all kind of acting like I'm this kind of person when I'm really this kind of person. Y'all really got a problem? Yo, what's up? Let's get it. And I will say that also throughout this album, it is weird because you hear Kendrick Lamar being extremely confident. Then you hear Kendrick Lamar being extremely vulnerable. Then you hear Kendrick Lamar talking about how he's a savior and he's pretty much sacrificing it for everybody, but nobody's asking him how he feels about it. It's just a whirlpool of emotions that take multiple listens to gather. Now, one thing that I will say about this Kendrick Lamar album is that it is extremely relatable when he talks about his belief, when he talks about faith, when he talks about trust. I think that that's a lot of stuff that a lot of people go through in their minds, in their daily life, and they're constantly spending time thinking about that, especially the trust one, because while I was listening to this album, I definitely found that that related to me also, because I don't know about you guys, but in this new day and age of 2017, or maybe it was back then, it's just hard to put your trust in people, you know what I'm saying? Like, I've given people a piece of my platform to do what you want to do, and I've had those same people turn on me, right? So hearing Kendrick Lamar talk about that definitely was like, yo, I feel you, homie. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I might not know it on your level, but I kind of know what you're talking about, and I agree. Okay, so the second highlight of this album has to be Duckworth, and Duckworth, when it comes to songs, has to be my favorite song of this album, just because, first of all, let's just go ahead and get into the production. The production of this song is extremely crazy because it starts off as one song, but then like transitions into another song with like frequent periodic beat changes, and I think that that is sick. And one thing that's sick about this song is kind of like the way it rises into the song with that slow intro, beginning with the start of it, and then as you listen to the song, Kendrick Lamar is actually telling a story as you listen to the song. Now, I will say that when it comes to Duckworth, it takes like 3 or 4 listens to actually understand everything that he's saying in that song, but once you go to like Rap Genius, once you actually sit down and listen to it, the actual story behind it and the way he ends off the album is extremely cool, with how he like reverses the words, and then the words reverse back throughout the whole start of the album, and then start off with the beginning of the album again. And I think that that is an extremely dope highlight for the album. Now, one thing that I want to get into when it comes to this album is how socially conscious Kendrick Lamar is. Now, when I first talked about the album on my First Thoughts video, I said that this album was different because it wasn't as socially conscious, but it was still socially conscious. But I will say that when I said that, I was wrong, because the more you listen to this album, the deeper meaning of every song is definitely socially conscious. I mean, the deeper meaning has a lot to do with Kendrick Lamar himself, but also the deeper meaning has a lot to do with social consciousness, with a lot of SJWs. It just has a lot to do with being socially conscious, and there's a lot of socially conscious themes that are thrown in there that if you listen to it like once or twice, that you might miss if you don't pay attention to it. Dog. Another highlight of this album has to be Fear. I mean, when it comes to Fear, we heard a little snippet of what Fear could sound like when we heard the Heart Part 4. That was the second beat change in that song. But Fear is actually a full song of that beat, and that beat is extremely sick. I don't know where the sample comes from. I heard that it is a classic beat. I don't know where any of that comes from, but just the beat itself is extremely dope. And when you listen to it, you hear a side of Kendrick Lamar that you don't necessarily always hear. A side of vulnerability, a side of him talking about his fears. I mean, hey, we all grew up with a black mom, and we know the usual things that black moms say when they about to yell at you, or they about to like give you a whooping or something like that. And he actually talks about those themes throughout the song, and then leads into his 27-year-old or his 28-year-old fears, and then connects that back to his younger ones. It's crazy how on a lot of Kendrick Lamar projects, he's able to talk about one thing, then go back to one thing on another song, and then with the final song or with pieces of the final project, actually bring everything together. But I will say that as he was able to do that, This album, like I said before, is very scattered and it is very bipolar. Loyalty featuring Rihanna is a cool song, but it's definitely one of those songs that I was kind of disappointed in because it's not one of my favorite songs. I mean, it's cool hearing Rihanna rap on the track and actually harmonize with Kendrick Lamar on that track, and the message behind that song is actually pretty good, but I feel like that song going along with the other songs, the beat along with like the first half of the album does not coincide together. It's not concise. It doesn't make it a seamless listen, and that implies back to me saying that this is like a real scattered album with it being like all over the place. And as far as the features, you have a feature from Rihanna, you have a feature from U2, and you have a feature from Zakaria, I think that's how you say his name. But I will say that the Rihanna feature is not better than the U2 feature, and the actual U2 feature itself is way better than I thought it was gonna be. Actually looking into U2, just because like, dog, whenever we go on our phones, we have a U2 album taking up gigabytes that we didn't even ask to be on our album. So going into that, I'm definitely like, I don't know about this, because I didn't even want to hear them when they just threw their music on my phone without asking me, you feel me? But I will say that going into that YouTube feature, it was definitely better than I expected. The production on it was actually warm. You had like a nice warm sounding beat, and YouTube actually did sound really good on that album. A lot of people said that they didn't like the YouTube feature on that album, but I thought that the YouTube feature was dope. I thought that it was pretty cool, and I actually come back to it frequently when I'm re-listening to the album. Keeping it real, when it comes to this new Kendrick Lamar album, I hear something on this album that I haven't heard in any other album. I mean, we definitely get traces of it in Overly Dedicated. We get traces of it in Good Kid, Mad City. We definitely get traces of it in To Pimp a Butterfly. I feel like To Pimp a Butterfly was Kendrick like looking into the mirror, or like evaluating himself and like figuring out and realizing his self-worth in like one complete album. But this album is different in the way that the tone of this album is very dark. The tone of this album is very sad. It's very vulnerable. It's very emotional. And while I'm listening to this album, it leads me to like question and think to myself, yo, is Kendrick Lamar happy? Like, is he enjoying all the riches that he has? Is he enjoying having all this money, being able to go on tours, being able to do whatever he wants? Because judging from the tone of this album and what you hear on this album still seems like Kendrick Lamar is very unsure of himself. But it seems like Kendrick Lamar in this album is just as unsure of himself, even less unsure of himself than he was before. And it's crazy how bipolar this album is, because in 1 second you get a confident Kendrick Lamar, just like how you did on the track promoting this album in The Heart Part 4, but then you can have a song like Feel or a song like Fear, which makes you take a step back and think, yo, like, is this man Kendrick Lamar actually happy? I just feel like when it comes to Kendrick Lamar and when it comes to this album, the more I listen to this album, the more I get out of it, and the more you can actually apply it to like your real and daily life. But it's just crazy how like you can have so much money, you can have so much success, and like usually when you listen to like other artists' growth, like let's just say Tyler the Creator for a matter of fact, his first couple of albums, when you first heard Bastard, when you first heard Goblin, both of those had like a negative tone. Both of those had a real dark tone. But now when you hear Wolf, and when you hear Cherry Bomb, you hear a more happy and more brighter tone, because like he's kind of off that, because he kind of got his riches, he got his success, and now he's pretty much reaping the benefits of that. In early Kendrick Lamar, when it comes to Overly Dedicated and when it comes to Section 80, it's like Kendrick Lamar is super unsure of himself, confident in his ability, but still finding himself. And then it's like over the course of these albums, he actually goes through, then finds himself. But then it's like this album right here, he's like looking back at everything that he's accomplished and being like, yo, was all of this worth it? Is all of this what I really think it is? And then he's going through a whole nother mind-numbing experience that is just weird in my opinion. This album is definitely interesting. I think that the interludes of this album are actually dope. And I usually don't like hearing interludes in the album, but I feel like Kendrick Lamar definitely delivered these right. He delivered these in a right way, which actually leads into a different song. But like I said, this album is very bipolar. This album is very scattered. This album is all over the place. When it comes to this album, the production and the textures of this album are great. But when it comes to listening to this album, firstly, you're going to need a couple of listens just to let the sounds actually sink in so you can become familiar to it all. Because the first time you're gonna hear it, you're gonna be sitting around like, yo, what is this? Like, what is going on in my ears? You're not gonna understand anything. But I will say that when it comes to this Kendrick Lamar album, this is a great album in my opinion. I feel like it documents Kendrick Lamar at his current moments in life. I would definitely love to hear an interview of him breaking down this album so I can get some more insight of what this album is actually about. But if I was to grade this album right now, I'd have to give it a strong 8. I feel like when it comes to Kendrick Lamar delivered once again. Now when it comes to this album, is this album a classic? I don't know, man. I'm gonna need more listens. I'm gonna need to listen to it more. But that's how I feel about the album. How do you guys feel about the album? Do you think that it's dope? Do you think that it's trash? Put that in the comment section down below. I got more videos coming soon. Please check out the social media. Everything is at Chris Takanashi, so you can get some behind the scenes, yo. Everything. I mean, like the Snapchat, the Instagram, the Twitter, everything is at Chris Takanashi. So check that out so you can see some nice pictures. Follow that. But I got more videos coming soon. And without further ado, I just gotta say, hey, blessings, 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 and Chris out.